The norm is you get to the workplace at the hour, right? Then you need to go and get coffee and put your lunch down and that kind of stuff. Whereas here is you need to be logged in for 9, so you get to the building at 8:50, right? So that you have time to do those things.
Yeah, I like the sound of the Portuguese working culture. I think I probably do quite well in that environment. Hi, welcome to AXA's International Healthcast. I'm your host, Chris, and I'm here today with Carolina. Hi, Carolina, thanks for coming in.
Hi, Chris, thank you for having me.
So we're going to talk today about working in a corporate environment as a non-native. But before we get to that, I'd kind of like a little bit of an introduction to who you are, where you come from, where you grew up, where you went to school, and why and when you moved to the UK. So if you could just start from the beginning.
Yep, of course. So I moved to the UK with my family when I was quite young. I was 14, 15. So yeah, a couple of years ago, 12, 13 years ago, more or less, And I finished school here, studied here at university, got my degree here, and this is also where I first started my actual professional career. So I moved from Portugal. I'm originally from Portugal. Other than having an internship there throughout my degree, I've never actually worked in Portugal as an adult, only in the UK. And I guess, the reason why we moved really was for work, my parents at the time, and also the possibilities in the UK that I guess you don't have in Portugal was one of the reasons why we moved.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said that you've never worked in Portugal.
Yeah.
And so kind of your first job, like your first corporate job, was in a non-native language to you. How was that? Like, like when did you first start to learn English? But then also, having your first job and trying to kind of integrate into a corporate environment when it's not your first language. Did you find that difficult?
Well, I began learning English when I was about 12 in school in Portugal. Then I moved there when I was 14, 15. So when I came, I already had a good level of English.
Yeah.
And I think finishing school here, especially doing my degree here, that really set me off. Like, I don't think it was anything that I was thinking of when I started working that was going to be hold me back. I was pretty confident in my level of English. So I don't think that was a struggle at all because I had all my studies for so long before that in English.
Oh, so you studied in English. So, okay. Because I was thinking that I did about 7 years of German when I was at school. And I never really got much further than ordering a pizza. No,
but everything was taught in English.
Okay, fine. And so by the time you started working in your current job, were you completely confident in your ability to speak the language, but then also do it at a corporate level?
I think so. I think as I studied an international business degree, there was a lot of essay writing, a lot of presentations, and there needs to be a certain formality. So I think having those couple of years throughout my degree definitely helped me in that sense.
Do you think that kind of in any way that kind of English as a second language or being a non-native in any way benefited your career and kind of benefited you maybe getting a job or kind of integrating into a business? Like, have there been any benefits to that?
Speaking English, you mean, as a second language?
Well, like speaking English as a second language or speaking 2 languages or perhaps kind of even just like being a non-native, right? Like, has that helped you in any way?
I don't think it's held me back, for sure. Like, it's never been something that's worked against me. In terms of benefiting me, I think I've never worked in an environment where I needed to speak another language. So that in that sense, very kind of literally, it hasn't benefited me. But I do think working in international environment, international company, which I do at the moment, it's meant that it's a conversation starter, right? When I meet people, one of the biggest things, especially, I started in a sales environment, you need to know how to talk to people. When you introduce yourself and say, oh, hi, my name is Carolina, I'm from Portugal, that just starts a conversation. And that's how you build relationships with people. People remember you that way. So I think in that sense, in terms of speaking to people, getting to know them, that's probably something that stands out about myself. Okay.
And so it actually sounds like a really positive experience. What about the negatives? So have you ever felt kind of out of place, or have you ever felt that you had to work harder, or that you had to do things differently?
Yeah.
Or act in a different way from people who were natives? Like, what have the struggles been?
I've not had a negative experience in that sense. Again, I think because I do work in an international company, there is, or based in the UK, so there's a lot of UK British employees, but there's quite a mix as well. So I don't think it's ever worked against me, but I do think not being based in the UK and not being English, whoever you are, whatever country you're from, there's always that thing in the back of your head, and I think most people will agree with this, that you just have to work a little bit harder to prove yourself that you deserve to be here as much as everyone else. And it's not like I've been made to feel this way, but things like Brexit, for example, you do just have to kind of show, I'm just as capable of doing the job, speaking the language, fitting in the culture of the company as anyone else. And I think that goes for anyone from any cultures, any countries.
Yeah. So kind of on the topic of like general culture, and kind of you talked about culture a little bit there. Were there any surprises to you kind of about corporate culture, but also you said when you moved when you were a teenager, were there any surprises at that point about UK culture compared to Portuguese culture, but also once you got into the workplace, UK culture versus Portuguese culture?
Yeah. Well, I think with the workplace, there's very much, I think in Portugal, and maybe quite a bit of Europe, Southern Europe, you work to live, right? You work to then be able to enjoy life outside of work. Whereas I think here's maybe a little bit more the other way around. Not everywhere, and of course not every company they work for, but I think there's much more focus on your work life and doing well and progressing and promotions and salary. That matters a lot more here than it does in Portugal. So that means then you get to not enjoy life less, but it's not, the priorities are a little bit different. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that was something that I didn't know, and I've probably become very used to it, and I think I'm probably a lot more English in that sense than I am Portuguese, just because I feel like I've learned that here, right? I've started that part of my life here, and that's what I know, even though I have an idea of what it's like there. This is all I've known, really. In terms of, in general, culture, the architecture, like, I was really surprised. I'd never been to the UK.
Yeah.
So architecture-wise, I was really like, what are all these brick houses?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess.
I suppose it could be maybe a little bit easier, right? When you've never had to work in Portugal, because you moved over when you were a teenager. I suppose, like, if you'd kind of got used to Portuguese work culture, and then you came over to work in the UK, and then you had to kind of integrate into UK work culture, it might have been a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
What about for your parents then? Like, you came over with your parents, did they find it difficult?
Yes, I think so, and I still think they do. They moved when they were, of course, a lot older. When I think I moved at an age where I was quite. It's definitely shaped me being here, right? So like, it's shaped who I am and having a mix of those cultures. But I think when my parents were a little bit older, getting used to the language, getting used to just how things work. If you have to sign up to a GP and how you go about sending a job application, those kind of things. I think those things were things that they didn't know about. We had family and friends close by that, of course, helped at the time, but I think just how the country works, how things move, right? I think that was definitely something that they didn't know much about before they moved.
Yeah. And do you think as a teenager you picked those things up quicker? So do you think it was easier for you?
Maybe. I think also because I was, Portugal's pretty. There's a bit of mix of cultures as well in Portugal. Maybe not as much as in the UK, but I was exposed to quite a few different backgrounds. So that coming here and being exposed to different cultures, languages, that wasn't something that was that much of a shock to me.
So you said that you, in many ways, you didn't find it too difficult to get used to being here and integrating into the culture. You didn't find that difficult, and you found the workplace culture kind of easy because you hadn't really experienced anything before. But would you say that kind of like having to live away from your home country and your culture has affected your well-being at all? And kind of not just within the context of work, right? But although it obviously that is quite important as an adult, but like has the fact that you are a non-native and you're not living in your home country affected your well-being at all?
I think there's definitely. I find when I go back for a holiday, visit family or friends, I come back a little bit torn because I see how great it is. About so many things about it is so great, like the weather, the food, and it's your home, right? You know the people, you know the streets, you know where you are. There's a sense of home that no other place is ever gonna have as much. But at the same time, I have been here so long that this is home as well, right? So it's a bit. It has definitely impacted my well-being because I do think sometimes when I come back, I'm a little bit down. I start thinking, what if I'd stayed? What if we hadn't moved? What if I go back? But I do think because I am so used and I moved when I was quite young, that I do feel like this is home as well,
Yeah.
I think it's been long enough that and I adjusted pretty well and pretty quickly that even though that's home, the UK is just as much home at this point.
Okay. And have you, kind of within a work context, would you say that you've ever kind of experienced any burnout or isolation, or feelings of isolation? Kind of, I think is probably quite a unique perspective because you've been here long enough. You probably you have friends and you've got family here, so it's not like someone who's kind of emigrated on their own. But do you kind of ever get that? And do you think that if you do get it, and you might not, but do you think that being in your home, being in Portugal, would help with that, or is it, the two kind of unrelated?
I do. Not so much the burnout, but I do feel like there's been times of isolation where it's more maybe that people. I don't think it's when you don't feel heard, right? That's a situation, whatever the situation is, that someone who you work with isn't actually listening to what you're saying. And I guess, when you think about it, maybe I'm not expressing myself the best way, maybe they're not understanding me, maybe they're also from other cultures and countries, speak other languages, and there's maybe a clash there that makes it quite hard to understand each other. But I think in that sense, there's definitely been times where I can very easily point to certain occasions, right, certain events, certain people where that's happened. But I don't know if being in this environment at home in Portugal would make it any easier or any worse.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think actually, a lot of the time those things happen just because of poor communication. A lot of conflict happens in the workplace just because of poor communication. And I think for you, obviously, it's really good that by the time you started working, you were fluent in English. You've done your degree in English, and I think that I've had situations kind of in my career where I can sometimes be quite an abrasive person, right? And I know that, and I know that I can kind of cause conflict just by kind of being the person that I am. Although, I know that I'm generally quite an easy person to work with. I've worked in some very difficult working environments, but I've never had to work in an environment when I wasn't speaking to people in my first language, right? And so, mix-ups in communication just because of language issues were never going to happen to me. So I always felt confident, at least in my ability to communicate, someone's ability to understand me. And so I think it's really good for you that you felt confident this entire time. And I think maybe that could have had a negative impact. I think if you hadn't felt confident in your language abilities, that might have made it a little bit more difficult when you started
100%.
working. So obviously it sounds like kind of up to this point that your career has gone really well. Would you say that there was kind of any kind of turning point, right? So in your career where you really started to feel confident and you started to think, I'm really going somewhere. I'm enjoying working in this company. I'm enjoying working in this country, and I kind of feel confident going forward. Has there ever been a moment like that, or has it been kind of a slow progress?
Yes, it's definitely. I think there's a moment where I was promoted to a role that had never been there before, as kind of a trial to see, let's see if it works, and that came from someone senior to me. It was kind of, I was ready to move on and to progress, and I was really open about that. And there was an opportunity for me to step up into a team lead role that had never been there, it never existed. It was, let's see if this works, and having that vote of confidence and that trust from someone quite senior to me, is kind of taking a chance on it, was definitely something that boosted my confidence a lot. I don't think I wasn't confident before, but that was very much kind of a step in the right direction, like I'm doing something right.
Yeah. And is there kind of anything from your background and upbringing that maybe that you have, because you're from Portugal, that maybe other people don't have? Maybe not just because you're from Portugal, but anything's kind of like specific to you that you gained from your upbringing that you think kind of like got you into that position where you were able to be promoted, ready to be promoted, and also kind of ready to thrive in kind of like a leadership role?
Not necessarily in relation to being Portuguese, but I think there is definitely, I was the first kind of generation university student in my family. So my parents didn't, and my grandparents didn't study. And there was a very big, not pressure, but there was kind of a push, we need to do well in school, go and study, get your degree, go into the corporate world and do well, right? And when you're younger, I kind of just did it because I did well in school, so that was quite relatively easy. But I didn't realize how much that would then have an impact in the workplace, because I am really ambitious and I want to go and get something, and I will do my best to go and get it. Yeah. So I think at the time I didn't know what that was going to do for me in the future, but that's definitely made me really eager and really ambitious and wanting to develop quite quickly, and I think that's kind of reflected in my very short career. Yeah,
and you said earlier that you did an internship. Yeah. And was that in Portugal?
That was in Portugal. Yes.
So how was that compared to the UK?
So that was during my degree, so I was there for about 4 months. The biggest difference, and I think this is quite stereotypical, but I will still say it, was punctuality.
Right.
I think it was either 9:30 that we started, or 9 till 6. And I was there about 5-10 minutes early, right? You get to the building, I get to my desk 5-10 minutes early to be logged in by 9 or by 9:30. Where I found that, and this was pointed out by a lot of my Portuguese coworkers to me, is how early I was every single day. Because people are walking through the door at 9, walking in the building, going up the stairs at 9 or 9:30, right? Get in, put your coat down, put your lunch in the fridge kind of thing, and they start working just before 10, So there is a big difference in that, and that was quite, every single day was pointed out, because I was always the one that was early, and I think that's probably quite English of me.
Yeah, and that's actually really interesting. I think I've worked quite a lot of jobs in the UK, and I've never had a job where you're not expected to be punctual. I'm not sure that, like, maybe those jobs do exist, right? Because there are more casual working environments. But do you feel like it was definitely kind of like more of a cultural thing where it's accepted?
100%, because that was a corporate environment as well, but I think the norm is you get to the workplace at the hour, right? Then you need to go and get coffee and put your lunch down and that kind of stuff. Whereas here is you need to be logged in for 9, so you get to the building at 8:50, right? So that you have time to do those things.
Yeah, I like the sound of the Portuguese working culture. I think I probably do quite well in that environment. That's actually really interesting. Yeah. I think from my perspective, like, I tend to be punctual, and I think it might be something to do with UK work culture because of meetings, right? So, and that's the problem. And it may have been kind of, what year did you do your?
So this was end of 2019, early 2020, so just before COVID.
Just before COVID, and it may be actually that. A lot of the time we can't really remember what it was like before COVID, right? And I do think the kind of work culture in the UK has become very meeting heavy, and it's definitely not just where we work, right? I have loads of friends, and you kind of see it in kind of like the memes on TikTok and things like that, where people talk about the fact that kind of UK work culture is really, really meeting heavy. And it doesn't allow you to be that kind of, it doesn't allow you to be that lax with your timing, because like a lot of the time you will have a 9 o'clock meeting to start with, or you will have a 10 o'clock meeting, but you need to get your work done before that 10 o'clock meeting starts. So and it may be, you know, if you kind of went back to Portugal now, it's kind of since COVID, where things may have become more remote, that meeting culture might have settled. I don't know, because if it's a kind of more of a pervasive cultural norm, hopefully kind of COVID hasn't taken that away from them, because it sounds like a really nice way to work.
I think it's a very cultural thing. I mean, COVID might have impacted it in some way, but I don't think the mindset will have changed much.
And I suppose kind of you've experienced that, and you've kind of experienced this, and like kind of where you now work in a global business, kind of has those experiences kind of in corporate culture in two countries helped you to understand kind of a multicultural customer base, but also kind of like a multicultural like kind of set of employees, right? So like the employees are multicultural as well, based all over the world, and so are the customers. So has your experience helped you with that?
I think the biggest thing is definitely my normal isn't everyone else's normal, and that's probably the biggest difference between being native or being from that place. So
that was actually is a really interesting perspective on kind of working in two different countries and kind of how different things can be. Would you say that kind of your experience of doing that and your experience of seeing how different things can be have kind of helped you with working in a multicultural business and working in a global business where your clients are global and, you know, your team is global as well?
So I think the biggest difference is my normal not being everyone else's normal, and understanding that people that you work with, colleagues, people that you manage, everyone, and even clients or customers, right? People grow up in different places, speak different languages, countries are going to be different. So what they're used to is going to be different to you. And even having been in the UK a very long time and being very used to and accustomed to the culture and the people, I think just having that in the back of my mind at all times when I communicate and when I listen, that what I think is normal or what should be the norm isn't going to be someone else's, is probably one of the most beneficial things, I think, when it comes to presenting yourself positively and being able to communicate with people.
So it sounds like you've actually got quite a kind of a unique perspective. How has that kind of impacted you from a management perspective as a manager? Obviously, kind of there's like a big impact on kind of you just in the workplace generally, but has it made your life easier as a manager? Has it made your job easier to do?
I think, I'm not sure if it's made it easier, but I think having in the back of my mind knowing that there are no other non-natives in the workplace, that I'm managing and being one myself, I think, again, I keep coming back to this, but listening, I think, and being able to understand where people are coming from. And I might not agree with something, right? And that's not unusual, right, for you to not agree with something, but be able to understand that, right, or where they're coming from, because something that's major to you is not going to have that much of an impact on someone else and vice versa. So understanding whether someone is English or they're not English, understanding that that person is coming from somewhere, they have a point. You might not agree with it, you might not see it, but being able to step back and be like, okay, they feel that way, they think that for a reason, and that's got as much value as anything else or anyone else's point.
So obviously you kind of haven't only come here and started working as a non-native, you've also come into the workplace just as a young person, right? And kind of into a corporate environment as a young person. How has that been? I think probably it can, from my perspective anyway, it probably seemed quite alien, because when I first came into the corporate world, I was actually, I think I was about 28, right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't particularly young. What was that like?
That's good. That's a good question, I think, because when I first started working, I had no work experience. It was my first job, right? Never had a part-time job, weekend job. And because of the industry that I was coming into, I just had this preconceived idea that it was going to be a lot of older people. So when I came into the company, especially in a sales environment, there's a lot of early 20s, mid-20s people, and that made it a lot easier to fit in. Because of course there's older people, right? Your seniors, your managers, your head of departments, but a lot of people on the same level as me were fresh out of university, or bachelor's degree, master's degree, people that were quite young in their first corporate jobs or their first jobs as well. So that was definitely something that helped me settle in quite quickly.
Do you think it would have been more difficult then if you'd come in and everyone was, 30 years older than you? Would that have made it a lot more difficult to settle?
Well, I don't know, of course, but I do think so, because especially being in that sales environment, there's a lot of socializing, right? It's quite a sociable environment to be in, and having peers your age definitely made it just easier to kind of feel like you have something in common with people.
I think kind of at AXA, once a year we release a Mind Health report. Okay. And we tend to find that young people, at least 18 to 24-year-olds anyway, struggle a lot more than their older counterparts, kind of particularly the non-natives. Now, from your perspective then, kind of having that, and having that ability to kind of be around people your old age, does that make it easier on not just your mental health, but just your well-being in general, right? Because it's not just about work, it's also about outside of work, and kind of that feeling of struggling or flourishing. That's everything. It's all encompassing. It's not all about work. But having people your own age, do you think that's kind of the big difference maker?
For me, I think it was, because if most of the people that I was working with were a lot older, it would just been a lot more difficult to relate to them, right? So not only would have I had the struggle of not being native, but having also different age groups around me, right? Not like my peers and people that were probably into the same things outside of work, have the same interests. So I do think having it kind of is a little bit of a bubble that you feel a little bit safe in, having those people around you.
That's a really interesting perspective. We're going to run out of time, I'm afraid. So kind of to close it out, I think I want to ask you kind of just maybe for a little bit of advice for people who are thinking of moving to work in the UK, or people who already have and could be having trouble adjusting to the workplace. Kind of what kind of pieces of advice would you give?
I think the biggest thing is probably, and this is not just with the UK, but anywhere where you go and work abroad, just being open-minded. Like I said, everyone grows up in different backgrounds, different places, different languages, and that shapes you so much. When you move abroad, however long you're there, it isn't going to feel like home right away. Nothing is going to feel natural or normal for a long time until it does. So being open-minded to, actually, maybe this is a better way of working, or this is a lot more fun, or these people are a lot more fun. So being open-minded to the culture, to the people, and to everything that goes with being in a workplace, how people work as well. And that probably will also mean that you will take something away really positive of how to do things better, right? And I guess being open-minded.
Do you think that doing the same outside of work, so kind of like being open-minded and socializing, for example, do you think that doing that and kind of laying the groundwork outside work helps 100%. In work? Yeah.
Again, I think I started in a sales role, which is quite a sociable environment, and building relationships with people. You have to have those conversations outside of work, right? You have them in the office, but it's when you go for a meal or for a drink outside of work that you get to know people a little bit more. And that networking and those communication skills and who you meet from different teams, different parts of the business, that will be so valuable to you at some point in building sort of your brand and your reputation out of those experiences and those conversations with people. So I think the social aspect of it is just as important, at least to me.
Thanks, Carolina. What is the one most valuable thing, before we go, that you've gained from building a career as a non-native? It could be a skill, it could be a trait. What do you think?
I think there's probably been quite a few, not just one. I think being adaptable. Like if I was to go and move somewhere else in Europe, or we'll stick to Europe because there's quite a bit of diversity with different European countries. Like I would say that I'm quite adaptable, even though I might find something weird or strange, I'm not used to it. I probably will find ways of being quite quickly fitting in with the people and the culture. So I think being adaptable and being just open to the different cultures and experiences and languages, because I think that you gain so much from it as well. Like it's not just that you're fitting in, but you're gaining something from someone else who speaks another language, grew up very differently to you. So I think being adaptable and being able to be flexible to who you're surrounded by.
Thank you, Carolina. This conversation has been amazing, actually. It's been really insightful, and I feel like I've learned a lot. And I'm hoping that our viewers will have learnt a lot too. Thank you for listening to AXA's first international Healthcast, and hopefully I will see you next time.